I thought the worst day of my life had already passed. The funeral was over. The flowers were wilting. The house was silent in a way that hurt more than the crying ever did. My son was gone. 29 years old, healthy, full of plans he would never get to finish. The night after the burial, I sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at his empty coffee mug. I hadn't washed it. I couldn't. It still smelled like him cheap coffee and the vanilla creamer he liked too much. That's when my phone rang. I almost ignored it. Who calls the day after a funeral? The screen showed an unfamiliar number. I answered anyway. Hello. There was a pause. Then a man cleared his throat. Mr. Harris. This is Daniel. I was your son's boss. My chest tightened. I am sorry to bother you. He continued quickly. I know this is the worst possible time, but you need to come see something. Right now. I gripped the edge of the table. See what? I asked. Another pause. There are things about your son's work you were never told. Things he never wanted you to know. My heart started pounding. Is this about how he died? I asked, my voice barely holding together. Daniel exhaled slowly. No, he said. It's about who he really was. The room felt suddenly too small. I can't explain this over the phone, he added. But if you come to the office, I'll show you everything. Files, messages, records, all of it. I looked toward my son's bedroom door. It was still closed. I hadn't gone in since he died. What if I don't want to know? I asked quietly. You deserve the truth, Daniel said. And so does he. The call ended. I sat there for a long time, phone still pressed to my ear. My son had been secretive lately, working late, avoiding questions, smiling when I asked if he was okay, but never quite meeting my eyes. What hadn't he told me? And why would his boss sound afraid? I stood up, grabbed my keys, and opened the door. Whatever waited for me at that office. I knew my life was about to change again. Before we continue, if you love emotional, true style stories filled with secrets, twists, and life-changing revelations, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Every episode uncovers a truth that can't stay buried. In part 2, I arrive at my son's workplace, and what I see on his desk makes my hands start shaking. Some secrets were never meant to stay hidden, but this one was about to explode. To be continued. Part to the office he never talked about. The building didn't look special from the outside. Grey glass, clean lines, no company name on the front. Just a number and a security camera watching every movement. I almost turned around twice, thinking I had the wrong address. My son had told me he worked in operations. Nothing fancy, just spreadsheets and meetings. This didn't feel like that. Inside, the lobby was quiet to quiet. A receptionist looked up, checked my name, and didn't ask for ID. She simply nodded, as if she had been warned I was coming. Top floor, she said. Mr. Daniel is waiting. The elevator ride felt endless. When the doors opened, Daniel was already standing there. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes. His tie loosened, shirt wrinkled like he hadn't slept. I'm really glad you came, he said. Please, follow me. We walked past rows of empty desks. Every computer was off. No personal photos. No coffee cups. It felt more like a command center than an office. Did everyone go home? I asked. Daniel hesitated. They were told to. That didn't calm me. We stopped at a glass-walled office at the end of the floor. My son's name was etched on the door. Senior analyst. I had to look twice. Senior? Daniel unlocked a door and stepped aside. This was his office, he said softly. I froze. The desk was spotless. Too spotless. Not a single paper out of place. No clutter. No mess. Just one framed photo turned face down. My hands were shaking as I walked in. I picked up the photo. It was ours. My son and me, fishing years ago. Both of us smiling like nothing bad could ever happen. I didn't know he had his own office, I said. Daniel closed the door behind us. There's a lot you didn't know. He walked to a locked cabinet and entered a code. The drawer slid open. Inside were files. Red folders. Black ones. Some marked confidential. Others stamped restricted. This isn't legal for me to show you, Daniel said. But after what happened, I don't care anymore. He placed one folder on the desk and opened it. At the top was my son's name. Under it, Lead Investigator, Internal Risk Division. My breath caught. Investigator? I whispered. Into what? Daniel looked me straight in the eyes. Into us. I stared at him. Your son was investigating this company, he continued, and several others connected to it. That doesn't make sense, I said. Why would his own company? Because this isn't just a company, Daniel interrupted. It's a front. My stomach dropped. He clicked his mouse, waking up the computer. A password screen appeared. Daniel typed quickly. The desktop filled with folders, hundreds of them. Emails, financial records, voice transcripts, surveillance logs. This is what he was working on the night he died, Daniel said. I leaned closer. One file was highlighted. Project Blacklight. Daniel opened it. A list of names appeared. Executives, politicians, foreign accounts. And at the bottom, status, active lead analyst, my son's name. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought I might pass out. You're saying my son was exposing something? I asked. Daniel nodded slowly. He found proof of money laundering, bribes, people disappearing. He was days away from handing everything over to federal authorities. I swallowed. Then why wasn't he protected? Daniel's jaw tightened. Because someone found out. Silence filled the room. I looked back at the screen. Is that why he died? I asked. Daniel didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into the drawer again and pulled out a USB drive. This, he said, was hidden inside his desk. He told me if anything ever happened to him, I was to give this to you, and only you. My hands trembled as I took it. What's on it? I asked. Daniel's voice dropped to a whisper. The reason he knew he wasn't coming home. I felt the floor tilt beneath me. Before I could say anything else, alarms suddenly blared through the building. Red lights flashed. Daniel's eyes widened. They're here, he said. Who? I asked, panic rising. The people your son was trying to stop. He grabbed his jacket. You need to leave, now. But, no questions, he snapped. Take the USB. Don't trust anyone. And whatever you do, he unlocked a door and shoved it open. Don't go back to your house. In part 3, I take the USB home anyway and discover a video my son recorded the night before he died, saying goodbye. Part 3, the message he never meant me to hear. I didn't listen. Daniel told me not to go home, but after everything he'd shown me, after the alarms, the panic, the words they hear, all I wanted was something familiar. Somewhere I could breathe, somewhere I could think. So I went home. The house was exactly as I'd left it the morning of the funeral. Quiet, too quiet. My son's jacket still hung on the back of the chair. His shoes sat by the door, muddy from a life that had ended without warning. I locked every door, drew every curtain. Then I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the USB drive in my hand. It felt heavier than it should have. I plugged my laptop in, hesitating before inserting the drive like once I did. There would be no going back. When the files appeared, there were dozens of folders. Dates, codes, names I didn't recognize. One file sat alone at the top. Read first. My hands shook as I clicked it. A video loaded. At first, there was only darkness. Then my son's face filled the screen. He looked tired, older than his years. The kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. He took a deep breath. Dad, he said softly. My chest tightened. If you're watching this, then something's gone wrong. I covered my mouth, tears blurring the screen. I didn't want you involved, he continued. I didn't even want you to know. But if I disappear, or if they make it look like an accident. He paused, swallowing hard. You need to understand why. The camera angle shifted slightly. He was in his office, that office. The one with the red folders and locked drawers. I found out things I wasn't supposed to, he said. At first, I thought it was just financial manipulation. Shell companies, offshore accounts. He gave a humorless laugh. It's never just money. He leaned closer to the camera. They're using the company to move people. Assets, sometimes bodies. My blood ran cold. I documented everything. Names, dates, proof. Enough to bring down everyone involved. He glanced toward the door, then back to the camera. That's why they're watching me now. I heard a faint sound through the speaker's footsteps. Muffled voices. He lowered his voice. I don't think I have much time. Tears streamed down my face. I know you'll blame yourself, he said gently. You always do. But this wasn't your fault. You raised me to do the right thing, even when it's dangerous. He smiled, just a little. I'm not scared, Dad. I just wish I'd told you sooner. I wish I'd said goodbye properly. I sobbed openly now. If something happens to me, the evidence is split. One part is with Daniel. One part is hidden somewhere only you can access. My heart skipped. He reached into frame and held up a small, familiar object. My old compass, the one I'd given him as a kid. You always told me, he said, that this would point me home when I was lost. He looked straight into the camera. Dad, it's pointing you now. The video ended. The screen went black. For a long moment, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My son hadn't just died. He'd left me a mission. I wiped my face and forced myself to focus. I reopened the folders, this time looking for patterns, locations, anything that mentioned a compass. Then I noticed something strange. Several files referenced addresses, coordinates, all near places we'd been together. Fishing spots, campsites, old road trips. One location stood out. A storage facility on the outskirts of town. My stomach dropped. That was where we'd gone the summer after his mother died. He'd cried there. I'd given him the compass that day. I closed the laptop. That's when I heard it. A soft knock. 3 taps. Slow, deliberate. I froze. The knock came again. Police. A voice called out. My heart pounded. Daniel had said not to trust anyone. I quietly moved to the window and peeked through the curtain. 2 men stood on my porch. They weren't in uniform. No badges. No cruiser. Just dark coats, cold eyes. The man at the door smiled slightly when he realized I was watching. Sir, he called again, louder. We just want to talk. I backed away, grabbed my keys, the laptop, and the USB. As I slipped out the back door, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. They know you watched the video. Go to the storage unit. Now. My hands trembled. Who sent it? Daniel? Or someone else? I didn't have time to decide. I got in my car and drove heart racing, mind spinning toward the place where my son had hidden the truth, and whatever waited for me there. In part 4, I open the storage unit and find something that proves my son didn't die the way everyone thinks. Part 4, the storage unit. The storage facility sat at the edge of town, half forgotten and poorly lit, like it didn't want attention. A single flickering lamp buzzed above the entrance, throwing long shadows across rows of metal doors. I parked a block away. Daniel's warning echoed in my head. If they know you're moving, you're already late. I checked my phone. No new messages. No missed calls, just silence. Too much silence. I slipped the compass out of my pocket. The needle trembled, then steadied, pointing straight toward the far end of the lot. Unit 317. My son had chosen this place deliberately. Somewhere ordinary, somewhere invisible. I walked slowly. Every sound amplified the crunch of gravel under my shoes, the distant hum of traffic, my own heartbeat thudding in my ears. When I reached Unit 317, my hands froze. The lock was gone, not broken, removed cleanly. Someone had been here. I swallowed hard and lifted the metal door inch by inch. ready to run if anything moved inside. The unit was small. Concrete floor, metal shelves along one wall, a single work table in the center, and on that table, boxes, neatly stacked, labeled in my son's handwriting. Evidence A, Evidence B, insurance policy. If anything happens. My knees nearly buckled. I stepped inside and pulled the door down just enough to hide the light. Then I opened the first box. Inside were flash drives, dozens of them, each one numbered, each one labeled with dates and names, executives, politicians, shell companies. The second box contained printed documents, contracts, shipping manifests, bank transfers with amounts that made my stomach turn. But it was the third box that made my blood run cold. Photos. My son, taken from a distance, at restaurants, in parking garages, leaving his office late at night. Someone had been tracking him long before he died. I dropped into a chair, trying to steady my breathing. Then I opened the last box. Inside was a sealed envelope, my name written across the front. I tore it open. Dad, if you're reading this, it means they didn't stop you in time. I'm proud of you already. Tears blurred the page. You need to understand something important. My death was staged. I stared at the words, rereading them again and again. Staged. They wanted it to look like an accident. I played along until I couldn't anymore. The autopsy report you saw was altered. The body wasn't mine. My chest tightened so hard it hurt. I'm alive. I gasped out loud. But I can't contact you directly. It would put you in danger. That's why I left the evidence split. If they come for you, it means I succeeded. My hands shook as I kept reading. There's one person you must trust, Daniel, and one person you must never confront alone. The note ended with a name I knew, a name I never expected. My son's boss, the man who had called me the day after the funeral, the man who'd looked me in the eye and said, "You need to see this." The realization hit me like a punch. He hadn't called to help. He'd called to see what I knew. A sound echoed outside the unit. Footsteps. More than one. I snapped the box shut, heart hammering. Voices whispered nearby. They said he'd come here. Check the end row. I shoved the evidence back into the boxes, grabbed the envelope and one flash drive, just one, and slipped it into my jacket. The footsteps were getting closer. I reached for the compass again. The needle spun wildly, then snapped toward the exit. I didn't hesitate. I yanked the door open and ran. Shouts erupted behind me. "Hey!" I sprinted down the aisle, lungs burning, fear pushing me faster than I'd moved in years. I vaulted into my car and slammed the door just as someone tried to grab the handle. The engine roared to life. I didn't look back. As I sped away, my phone buzzed again. A single message. "You have the truth now. The next move is theirs." I knew then this wasn't about uncovering what happened to my son. It was about surviving long enough to expose everyone responsible. And if I failed, they would make sure I truly buried him this time. In part 5, I confront the one person I trusted most and discover just how deep the betrayal goes. Part 5, the man I trusted most. I didn't go home. That house had already been watched once, maybe twice. And now that I knew my son was alive, or at least had been when he wrote that letter, going back there would be like hanging a sign on the door that read, "I know too much." Instead, I drove until my hands stopped shaking. I pulled into a 24-hour diner off the highway, the kind with flickering neon lights and booths worn smooth by decades of late-night confessions. I parked where I could see the entrance and backed my car in, just in case. Only then did I let myself breathe. I laid everything out on the table. The envelope, the single flash drive I'd taken, my phone, the compass. They looked small, ordinary, but I knew each one could destroy lives, or save one. I stared at the name my son had written in that letter. Daniel, his boss. The man who'd sounded scared on the phone. The man who'd shown me the files. and then conveniently vanished when the alarms went off. I had believed him because I needed to. That was my mistake. I plugged the flash drive into my laptop, keeping my back to the wall. A single folder opened automatically. For Dad, if Daniel calls first. My heart sank. Inside was a short video clip. Daniel's face filled the screen. Not the exhausted, worried man I'd seen in the office, but someone calmer, controlled. If you're watching this, Daniel said, then I did what I had to do. I clenched my jaw. I never planned for things to go this far, he continued. Your son was brilliant. Too brilliant. He wouldn't stop digging. The video cut to security footage. Daniel arguing with my son in a hallway I recognized. I warned him. Daniel's voice continued over the footage. I told him the line he was crossing. My son stood his ground. I could tell by the way he didn't back away. I didn't kill him, Daniel said quickly. But I didn't stop what came next. The video ended. I slammed the laptop shut, chest heaving. Daniel hadn't pulled the trigger, but he'd opened the door and stepped aside. That was worse. My phone buzzed. Daniel calling. The timing was almost impressive. I let it ring once, twice. Then I answered. You shouldn't have gone to the storage unit, he said calmly. I said nothing. I was hoping you'd take longer to connect the dots, Daniel continued. But you always were sharper than you looked. You lied to me, I said finally. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. Yes, he admitted, but not about everything. I could hear traffic in the background. He was moving. Where is my son? I demanded. Silence. Then softly, alive. For now. My hands curled into fists. You're using him, I said. I'm protecting myself, Daniel replied. Your son put too many powerful people at risk. People who don't forgive. I'm the middle ground. You staged his death, I said. You made me bury an empty coffin. I gave him a chance to disappear, Daniel said. Most people don't get that mercy. Mercy. I laughed, short and bitter. What do you want? I asked. Another pause. Everything he collected, Daniel said. Every file. Every copy. In exchange, you walk away. You get your son back, quietly. I looked down at the compass in my hand. The needle pointed south, steady, like it was edging me forward, not back. You don't sound afraid, I said. I don't need to be, Daniel replied. You don't have leverage. I smiled for the first time since the funeral. You're wrong, I said. He frowned. I could hear it in his breath. Because while you were watching me, I continued, my son was planning for you. I hung up. My phone immediately lit up with messages, unknown numbers, foreign prefixes, threats wrapped in politeness. I ignored them all. Instead, I sent one message of my own, to the only person my son had told me to trust. A secure address, a time, and 3 words that carried more weight than any evidence. Daniel is compromised. I closed the laptop and stood up. If Daniel thought I was going to negotiate, he'd misunderstood something fundamental. I wasn't a man trying to save himself anymore. I was a father finishing what his son had started. In part 6, the FBI steps in. Daniel makes his move, and I'm forced to decide whether exposing the truth will save my son or kill him. Part 6, the line you can't step back from. The reply came faster than I expected. Not a text, not a call, a knock. 2 short taps, 1 long. I didn't move. The diner window reflected the parking lot 2 unmarked cars had. Rolled in without headlights. Doors opened. Men stepped out, calm, controlled, not looking around because they didn't need to. I stayed seated. A 3rd knock, firmer this time. Mr. Harris, a voice said quietly. Federal Bureau of Investigation. I stood, hands visible, and opened the door. They didn't rush me. That told me everything. Inside the booth, I laid the flash drive, the envelope, and the compass on the table. One of the agents raised an eyebrow at the last item. Your son was thorough, he said. You have no idea, I replied. They listened. All of it. The office. The alarms. The storage unit. Daniel's call. The video confession. When I finished, the older agent exhaled slowly. He made a move, he said. We intercepted chatter an hour ago. Daniel's trying to move your son. Where? I asked. The agent shook his head. That's the problem. He's not using official channels anymore. My chest tightened. Then we're out of time. Another agent stepped forward. Sir, there's something you need to understand. Once we move, there's no quiet ending. No protection deals. No disappearing. I nodded. I buried my son once already. That settled it. They moved fast after that. I was placed in the back of an unmarked SUV, not restrained, but not free. We drove without sirens, slipping through traffic like shadows. Phones buzzed constantly between the agent's coordinates, confirmations, redirections. Then my phone vibrated. Unknown. He's moving me tonight. Dockside. If you get this, don't come alone. My hands shook so badly, I nearly dropped the phone. It's him, I said. My son. The agents leaned in. Dockside. Daniel wasn't running. He was trading. The warehouse sat by the water, half abandoned. Lights flickering like they couldn't decide whether to stay alive. Cargo containers formed narrow corridors, perfect places to disappear someone quietly. We stopped 2 blocks away. You stay here, the agent said. No, I replied. He met my eyes, sir. That's my son, I said. And Daniel won't show his face unless he thinks he's winning. Silence. Then a nod. Stay behind us, he said. If this goes wrong, you run. I nodded. We moved. Inside the warehouse, voices echoed. Footsteps, the scrape of metal. I heard my son's voice strained, but alive. Dad, he called suddenly. My heart nearly burst. I'm here, I said, stepping forward before anyone could stop me. Daniel turned. His smile vanished. You shouldn't have come, he said. No, I replied. You shouldn't have underestimated him. I nodded toward my son. Daniel laughed once, sharp and humorless. You think this ends well? Once this information is public, no one walks away clean. That's the point, I said. Floodlights snapped on. FBI, a voice shouted. Hands where we can see them. Daniel reached for his phone. Too late. Agents swarmed. Shouts filled the warehouse. Someone tackled Daniel to the ground as my son broke free, running toward me. I caught him, held him. For the first time since the funeral, he was real, breathing, alive. I'm sorry, he whispered. No, I said. You were brave. Daniel screamed as they cuffed him. You think this is over? He shouted. There are others. I know, I said calmly. That's why I brought the truth. As we walked out into the night, my son leaned against me, exhausted. Is it really done? He asked. I looked back at the warehouse, the flashing lights, the men who thought they could hide behind power. This part is, I said. But deep down, I knew. When you expose a system, it doesn't collapse quietly. In part 7, the fallout begins. Names are released. Arrests spread across borders. And my son must decide whether to disappear forever or testify and burn it all down. Part 7, the fallout. The next 48 hours felt unreal. My son slept in a secure hospital room under a name that wasn't his. Armed agents stood outside the door, pretending to be orderlies. Every few hours, someone new came in to ask questions, careful ones, precise ones, asked by people who already knew most of the answers. Daniel didn't speak. Not at first. His lawyers arrived before sunrise, confident, expensive, aggressive. They demanded silence orders, threatened lawsuits, invoked names meant to scare people into compliance. It didn't work, because the moment Daniel was taken in, something broke loose. Accounts froze. Shell companies collapsed overnight. Flights were grounded. Phones went dark. The network my son had been tracing wasn't a single beast. It was a nest, and the evidence he'd gathered spread across drives, servers, and backups was now in the hands of people who knew how to use it. An agent sat across from me in the hospital room later that day. "We're moving fast," she said. "Faster than they expected. But there's a decision to make." I already knew what it was. She glanced toward my son, who was staring out the window. "He can disappear," she continued. "New name, new country. No testimony, no risk." "And the other option?" I asked. She met my eyes. "He testifies. On record. Publicly. Names, ends this for good." My son turned slowly. "They'll come after you," he said. "After him. After everyone." "Yes," the agent replied honestly. "Eventually." Silence filled the room. I walked to the window and stood beside my son. "You don't owe anyone heroics," I said quietly. "You already did more than most people ever would." He nodded, eyes wet. "I didn't do this to be brave," he said. "I did it because I couldn't live knowing I stayed quiet." That told me everything. The next morning, the first arrest warrants went public. Daniel's face was everywhere. Headlines screamed words like fraud, conspiracy, human trafficking, obstruction. Names of executives I'd never heard before were suddenly on every news channel. But there was one headline that made my hands tremble. "Whistleblower confirmed a live testimony pending." My son squeezed my hand. "They know," he said. "Yes," I replied. "And they're afraid." That afternoon, Director Lewis from the Bureau sat down with us. "This will not be easy," she said. "There will be pressure, threats, smear campaigns. They'll try to make him look unstable, criminal, complicit." She slid a document across the table. "Witness protection terms, new identity, relocation, permanent separation from the life he'd known." My son read it slowly. Then he set it aside. "I'll testify," he said. The room went still. Director Lewis nodded once. "Then we'll protect you as best we can." After she left, I pulled my son into a tight embrace. "I'm proud of you," I said. He laughed softly. "You already buried me once. I think I can handle a courtroom." That night, I went home for the first time since the funeral. The house felt different, lighter, as if it knew the truth now. I stood in my son's room, looking at the bed that had once been empty forever. My phone buzzed. A single message. "Unknown sender. You chose noise over silence. That has consequences." I deleted it, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of consequences. I was tired of quiet. In Part 8 final, the courtroom explodes. The truth goes public, and my son faces the people who try to erase him, while I discover that some goodbyes are really beginnings. Part 8 the day, the truth spoke final part. The courtroom was already full when we arrived. Reporters packed the benches. Cameras clicked non-stop. People whispered names they only half understood. Executives, politicians, corporations that had always seemed untouchable. My son sat beside the prosecutor, wearing a simple suit, his shoulders squared. He looked younger than I remembered, lighter, as if finally standing in the open air had taken years of him. When Daniel was brought in, the room went silent. He didn't look powerful anymore. He looked small. The judge called the case to order. Charges were read longer than anyone expected. Fraud, conspiracy, human trafficking, obstruction. Each word landed like a hammer. Then my son stood. I felt my hands curl into fists as he took the oath. He didn't look at Daniel. He didn't look at the cameras. He looked straight ahead and began. He told them everything. How he'd been recruited. What he discovered. How he'd been pressured, threatened, isolated. How Daniel had offered him a way out, disappear quietly or die loudly. The room shifted as names were spoken. Faces in the audience went pale. Some stood up and left. Others stared, frozen, realizing the story they dismissed as rumor was real. When the prosecutor asked about the stage death, my son paused. "I knew my father would survive losing me," he said. "But I also knew he would never stop looking for the truth." My throat tightened. Daniel finally broke. He stood up, shouting, accusing, denying until the judge slammed the gavel and ordered him restrained. It was over then. Not just the trial, the lie. Weeks later, the headlines changed. Global network dismantled. Multiple arrests across 3 continents. Whistleblower protection granted. My son entered witness protection under a new name in a new place. We were allowed limited contact, carefully scheduled calls. Voices distorted slightly for safety. But he was alive. That was enough. One evening, months later, I stood in the same kitchen where I'd once answered the call after the funeral. The mark was still there, but now it felt like a memory, not a wound. My phone rang. This time, I smiled before answering. "Hey, Dad," my son said. "I'm okay." I closed my eyes and let the silence settle, not the heavy kind, but the peaceful one. "I know," I said. After the call, I stepped outside and looked up at the sky. I had buried my son once, but what I'd really buried that day was ignorance, and what rose in its place wasn't revenge. It was truth. Sometimes the call you fear the most is the one that brings everything back to life. The end.